Welcome to this seminar on the timeline of the exile. Actually, the exile all the way through until the time of Jesus. A lot to go through, so we're going to break up this seminar into various sections. The first section here is a timeline of from the end of the kingdom of Judea with Jehoiakim as king, and then it will go down and to Jehoiachin his son and Zedekiah the last king. And we'll go through all this in detail. And then we'll go into the time of Nebuchadnezzar as the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem and Judea. And then Evil-Merodach is mentioned as a ruler of the Babylonians. Belshazzar is another ruler, the last ruler of the Babylonians. He was when Daniel saw the writing on the wall. Then we get into a person called the Arthasasta, which we'll explain. King James calls him Artaxerxes, which it's not. Artaxerxes comes later. Then comes Cyrus, the first Persian, Cyrus the Great, who is actually Cyrus II, but he was considered, they called the second the Great. And we'll go through then Cyrus's period of time, and then Ahasuerus, which is mentioned as the father of Darius, and then Darius the first, and then it goes through quite a bit, and then ends up with Artaxerxes, who is the ruler at the time of Esther, which would be the end of the Bible. The last chapter of the Bible would be in the book of Esther. But it continues after that with the fall of Babylon, and this is all of the Persian Empire, emperors that we mentioned: Cyrus the Great, Darius, Artaxerxes, and then Artaxerxes. Then that's the end of the Bible right here, is Esther, someplace in that period of time. But then down at the bottom we see that Alexander comes in the 356. So this is the end. Then we come into the period of time that's not in the Bible, and that would be in the in-between. And we go into Alexander, and then the Seleucid Empire, which is the Greek Diadochi is called, the successors to Alexander the Great, two of them mainly, and Antiochus Epiphanes and Ptolemy, and then into the Roman period, and then the diaspora, where the Jews are sent throughout the world by the Romans. Next, we come to the seminar on the people of the exile. And I received a lot of the information on these people by going through, it's called Hatch and Redpath, Concordance of the Septuagint. You can see it here. And in the back of the Hatch and Redpath, it has a section on all the Greek names. Let's see if we can get a good picture of it here. Of all the Greek names. There. And so in the places where these names are used. Now, the names are somewhat different than what you see in the King James, mainly with the Arthasasta being called Artaxerxes in the King James, which I'll show is not the case. So then we go through all these people, starting with Jeremiah, who was the last prophet of the kingdom of Judah, and then he went into exile into Egypt, possibly to Babylon. Then we have Ezekiel, who was a man who went to the exile. He doesn't mention being any king, so we're not going to go through the whole book, but we're just going to go through a little bit of the history of the timeline. Then we come into Nabuchodonosor, Nebuchadnezzar, who is the ruler of Babylon, and we'll go through that. And then next to that will be Evil Merodach, or Ulamazarach, in the Bible, and Jeremiah mentions him. Valtasar, who is the man with the writing on the wall, with Daniel. And then Kyros, or Cyrus, will go through his period of time. Then after Cyrus comes Ahasuerus, which is not mentioned in history, but it is in the Bible, and we're following the Bible. And Ahasuerus. Then after him, just a couple of mentions of him, we come to Darius, the Great, and his kingdom. And then we follow through Darius, and then we end up with the people of Esdras, the book of Ezra, the next prophet. And after Ezra, we'll find out about, then Nehemiah, the two books of the last history of the temple in Jerusalem, more or less, right before the book of Esther. And we'll go through the book Nehemiah and show you all about the timeline of him. Then the Arthashasta, which is, I believe, either Darius or Cyrus or both. It's a ruler. And then after the Arthashasta, which is basically mentioned in Nehemiah, we'll go into the person of Zerubbabel, and the things about him in the Old Testament. And then we will go after Zerubbabel to the person of Jesus. That word is same as Jesus in the New Testament, that the King James called Jesus. It's Joshua. That we'll go through all this, explaining all this when we get to that point of time. So then then we're going to go into the book of Zacharias, the second to last book of the Bible, and Haggai, which were about the same time. And we'll be then, after this timeline series, we're finishing up with the book of Haggai, and then the book of Zechariah, and then finally Artaxerxes. We'll go through him, and with the book of Esther, and that will end the people of the exile. But we have a little bit more to go, more seminars, books and years timeline. So we're going to go through the books then of the Bible and the timeline that is given in the books of the Bible, which basically is outlined at the beginning, which we will coincide the two together. So the book of Jeremiah is the end of the kingdom, the beginning of the exile with Jeremiah. Go through all these places, and then Ezekiel would be the next book, and Ezekiel goes to the, as I mentioned, he goes to the exile people, and after Ezekiel comes the prophet Daniel, who will go through Daniel and his dealings with Nebuchadnezzar and others. And after Daniel comes the book of Ezra. We'll bring out all the things of Ezra, the timeline, and then the book of Nehemiah, then followed with the book of Haggai and Zechariah, and then ending with Esther. Now, we're not going to go through each of these books completely because This is just going through the timeline, but we will be going through Haggai and Zechariah, finishing the Old Testament, and then see what the Lord leads after that. So this is an introduction to the series on the timeline between the exile and Jesus. Hope you'll join us in the rest of these videos. Very interesting, especially with the things that are going on today with Israel, who has went through a 2,000-year period of being exiled and came back in 1948. And we see the things that are going on right now in my lifetime, because I was born in 41. So all the time of Israel's existence I have lived, and looking at the things and what they're doing today and what they did after the exile when they came back is very interesting to compare the two. We'll do that a little bit somewhat as we go through the video seminar. So again, I hope you join us with these videos in the timeline. Till then, God bless.